new teaser trailer for Superman has definitely become the most talked about teaser trailer for any DC movie ever. I'm the king of the world! That's because there is a lot riding on this film. In fact, a lot more than just Superman is riding on this film. The entire superhero cinema world itself is riding on this Superman film. Marvel, with its string of losses lately, and doesn't look like it's going to be getting much better in the near future, judging by the fact the new Captain America film is $400 million in its budget so far. Show me the money! And they're still doing reshoots because the movie's in trouble.
I got a bad feeling about this.
And DC has also had its string of flops as well. So much is riding on this film. And I watched the trailer, and I thought there was some good stuff, and perhaps some also not good stuff. And of course, ultimately, you can't know for sure until you see the actual movie. But as far as the good stuff, the first thing that I thought was really good was when the trailer starts off, we see Superman, he's bloodied.
Nobody makes me bleed my own blood.
We see Superman crashing to Earth. He maybe just got his butt kicked. And that's actually a good thing because we need to feel Superman is in jeopardy. Another thing that I thought was really good was Krypto. Depending on how it's done, of course, because if it's done as a total joke, that wouldn't work.
Who let the dogs out?
But when we see Krypto approaching Superman, first of all, he's not flying, which helps ground it. And in this world of Superman, even though that might seem like total make-believe, it's still really important to keep things grounded. And the way Krypto comes to rescue Superman, raising up that massive snow cloud from his super speed, was quite compelling. And more importantly, it shows that connection between human and man's best friend, dog.
And if you need a friend, get a dog.
And having Superman have someone that he can talk to and confide in and trust with his secrets is a very powerful idea and makes Superman more grounded and more human. And James Gunn in real life has said that he was inspired by his own dog to create Krypto in this film. Krypto does not fly, but apparently he does have superpowers judging by the speed. Another thing that I thought was really good about this trailer was we see Clark Kent working at the Daily Planet and Clark Kent interacting with Lois Lane. The reason why I say this is so important is because, for example, in Man of Steel, we won't even see Clark Kent in the way that we know him working at the Daily Planet until the last few seconds of the film. Another aspect of Clark Kent that I thought was really positive was the expressions on his face, both as he's trying to get his way into the Daily Planet. He looks like a guy running for a bus as the bus is about to leave the bus stop. He has that sense of being out of place and not totally in control. Similarly, that expression on his face when he's looking at Lois Lane and Lois Lane's looking at him inside the Daily Planet. That's a good expression for a Clark Kent character. Of course, I do hope that they're able to have the genius that Christopher Reeve was able to incorporate into the character, because when he was playing Clark Kent, although he was bumbling and mild-mannered, there was also the indication that really he's very confident. He's just pretending to not be confident. And the audience was always in on it. And that's a great nuance, a great subtlety that I hope they're able to show here too, so that we understand that Clark Kent really is just pretending to be that personality of lacking confidence. Clark Kent is such an incredible character because it allows us to relate to Superman. Because even if he's just pretending to be that guy, the fact is as Clark Kent, he does not get the glory. It helps us identify with him.
Are you like some special forces guy or something?
I'm just a cook.
And in this movie, we see that Clark Kent, his hair is really messy, which is great because it helps distinguish him from Superman. It adds to the disguise. And so between the messy hair and the glasses and the fact that he looks like a man who is not confident, as you can see in this scene where he's fumbling around people trying to get inside the Daily Planet, all that helps to improve the disguise. And before you think that's just a joke and that could never work in real life,
Are you suggesting that I'm not who I say I am?
think about all the Hollywood celebrities that go completely unrecognized when they're not wearing their makeup, when maybe they're wearing sunglasses and a hat. It really makes it hard for them to be recognized or detected. It happens all the time. In fact, Henry Cavill actually proved that. He was standing outside a building and nobody even recognized who he was. So it actually shows that it could work. Also, I think was smart casting from another perspective as well. The fact that he's really tall.
Size matters not.
Now, obviously, he has to act, too, and have the ability to do that. But the fact that he's physically imposing and really tall, as you can see in that scene where he's taller than all the people around him as he's trying to get into the Daily Planet. When you compare that to how Superman was portrayed in Batman vs. Superman, where we see Batman is taller than Superman, and we see that not only is Batman taller than Superman, but Batman kicks Superman's butt in that movie as well. And also in that movie, we see that there's no respect given to Superman. The most kick-ass scene in that movie was when Batman is in the warehouse rescuing Superman's mom, which, by the way, is another problem in not giving enough respect to Superman, because Superman's not even the guy to save his own mom. Batman's doing it. Why do I bring this up? Because it looks like in this trailer for this movie, they've corrected that. They're making sure that Superman looks like Superman. Superman is tall. Superman's disguise is also improved with the messy hair. All that looks promising, so that's great. On a side note, getting back to the way Batman vs. Superman treated Superman, the fact that Superman gets killed in that movie, and it was only his second movie, also shows a disrespect for the Superman fans. You've barely made it to the second movie and you're already killing off the character. That shows a lack of love for the character and a lack of creativity, because if that's the only idea you can come up with to get people interested to come to your movie, that we're killing Superman, that shows you don't appreciate Superman, or that you don't have creativity, or both. Whereas it looks like in this movie there's a lot of love for the character of Superman. And James Gunn has even said he's incorporated a lot of the elements from the Silver Age of Superman. Now, how about the costume in this movie? This has really divided a lot of people because it doesn't look as slick or maybe as serious as some of the other costumes in the Superman movies.
Where did you get those clothes? At the toilet store?
So, on one hand, let's look at the positive. David Corenswet himself said he wanted to make sure that Superman is still wearing the red trunks, because actually James Gunn was not going to have the red trunks in the movie. And I understand why, because some people might say it looks outdated, it looks silly. First of all, it's great because it gets back to the original roots of the character. That's how Superman looked in the costume. But also, David Corenswet has said it was his idea that Superman dresses this way because he wants kids to not be afraid of him, so Superman looks like a wrestler. And the truth is, that was very close to the original reason for why Superman had that type of costume, because that's the way the strongmen would dress up. When I say strongmen, I mean the professional strongmen in the 1930s. That's the kind of outfit that they would have with those kind of trunks. So it's a throwback to those days. The other thing, too, about wearing that costume is that by having a costume that doesn't look so slick, it actually forces us, the audience, to focus more on the man behind the costume. Because it's not the costume that makes the hero, it's the hero that makes the costume. And it might actually make his actions more memorable, because we're forced to focus on what is this guy actually doing, not how cool his costume looks. Also, we don't know if this might just be the costume that we see in the trailer, and maybe later on in the same film or in a sequel, his costume will evolve to look more like the one we're familiar with. I was really happy to also see that finally the yellow S on the back of the cape has returned. We have not seen that in any of the Superman films since the original films with Christopher Reeve. So we're talking here Man of Steel, Batman vs. Superman, Superman Returns. None of them had that yellow S on Superman's cape. So it's just good to see that they're returning to the original way Superman was portrayed in the comic books and even in the original movies. Another element of this trailer that was really good was Lois Lane. I like the fact that they show Lois Lane with the black hair, which is really the way she was in the original comic books. Even though I thought Kate Bosworth did a great job of playing Lois Lane in Superman Returns, her hair wasn't the original dark color, the black that it's supposed to be. Also, this Lois Lane, and it could be that in real life she is a knockout, but it looks like the way they've portrayed her in this movie is she's still pretty, but not so much of a knockout so that it's not distracting, and the focus can be on her as a journalist. Also, I like the fact that they show Superman and Lois Lane interacting with each other as Clark Kent and Lois Lane. I just hope that in this film, they don't immediately skip to the part of Lois Lane knowing who Clark Kent is, like they did in Man of Steel, where she quickly figures it out, because that's taking away all the fun of Lois Lane not knowing who Superman is. There's so much fun you can have with scenes where things come close, where she almost finds out, and what Superman does to make sure she doesn't find out. It's a lot of fun, and I hope they don't ruin all that by just making Lois Lane find out or know right away that Clark Kent is Superman. You can actually end up having it happen, maybe near the end of the film or in a sequel, but I think it might be really good if she doesn't know right away that Clark Kent is Superman. Another element of the trailer that I thought was really good was we see that there is not only a connection between Lois Lane and Clark Kent, but we see that there's romance.
You complete me.
And the love between Superman and Lois Lane, or Clark Kent and Lois Lane, is so important. Superman wanting to have that love, having that relationship, that connection, is also what allows us to identify with him. As Richard Donner said in the first Superman film, if the relationship between Superman and Lois Lane doesn't work, the whole movie falls apart. And I believe that's going to be true here too. If we can believe that that relationship is real, we are going to feel connected to this movie so that whatever is happening to Clark Kent or happening to Superman, we feel is happening to us. While we're on the topic of Lois Lane and Clark Kent, we see them in the Daily Planet, and I think it's great they make sure to show that the Daily Planet is an important part of this movie, because having Superman work at a regular job, a real job, makes the audience watching the movie more able to relate to Superman. Superman has got to meet deadlines, he's got to report to duty, he's got to get his job done, just like everybody else does in this world. So that's great. It's also going to be interesting to see how do they keep the Daily Planet relevant in a world where very few people read newspapers anymore.
I'm Ron Burgundy.
Is it that the Daily Planet is such a great newspaper that it's one of the few places that we still revere for getting accurate information in a world where we're getting mostly misinformation? And the Daily Planet is one of the few places that people can actually rely on for accurate information given with integrity? Or is it maybe something that's totally online? Or is it a combination of newspaper and online? So that could be really interesting too, to see how does that fit into the modern world. I thought it was also really good that we see Superman rescuing a girl from, looks like some kind of explosion. That kind of scene also underscores Superman being part of our real world. At the same time, they also show some kind of monster. It's okay to have Superman fighting these galactic, cosmic, monster-type villains or bad guys or threats. But I think that personally, it's better not to have too much of that because it starts to get away from grounding Superman into reality. And this gets me to the most important point of all. A great Superman movie always encapsulates verisimilitude. That's the word that Richard Donner, the director of the original classic 1978 gem, Superman the movie that set the bar for all superhero movies, that's the word that he used. Verisimilitude means making the impossible feel real or feel true. So he made sure that everything in that movie was to make Superman feel like we can actually believe in Superman. To quote the movie, "You will believe a man can fly." That's the movie that got me loving Superman. And really, more than the comics or cartoons or anything else, it was that movie. So in this movie, when I see that there's monsters that he has to fight, okay, it could still work, but it is something that makes me wonder a bit. Also, the introduction of all these other superheroes within the same Superman movie, like Hawkgirl and Green Lantern and Ultraman. James Gunn had said the whole point of this movie is just make a great Superman movie. He's not worried about how this is going to set up the rest of the DCU. But it looks like he is trying to set up the DCU. Otherwise, why would he fill in this movie with all these other characters? Wasn't that the problem in the first place when the DCU started? They tried to catch up to Marvel too fast. Marvel took their time making individual standalone movies for Iron Man and for all these other characters. So it looks like maybe they haven't learned their lesson, even though I understand that Superman has been established quite well in people's minds, so maybe they feel we can now start to talk about other characters, but I really hope they do not dilute Superman by having too many characters in the same movie. And I also hope it's not getting back to what they did in Batman vs. Superman, because in that movie it seemed they didn't have enough confidence to think a movie can work with Superman alone, so they have to put Batman in it. And really, it was more like a Batman movie with a bit of Superman. And it was really, like I said before, a slap in the face to the Superman fans, because they end up killing Superman, and Batman kicks Superman's butt. It was really not a great movie at all if you're a Superman fan. And while we're at it, that leads me to what might be another possible issue. And that is James Gunn, although he's clearly a very talented guy, it looks like his strength is making Guardians of the Galaxy, which is a ragtag team of characters with moral ambiguity.
I am Groot. So what?
But Superman is not a ragtag team. He's one guy. And in fact, that's part of the whole point of Superman. He's the one that gives hope. He's the superhero. If there's all these other superheroes, do we really need Superman that much? And Superman is absolutely the opposite of moral ambiguity. Superman is 100% clear. He represents goodness. That doesn't mean it's easy for him to do the right thing, but he's not a character with moral ambiguity. So that could be a potential problem here.
I got a bad feeling about this.
It takes real skill and nuance and sensitivity to understand how to do this properly. Just for example, to compare a movie that did it right and didn't do it right in the Superman universe, in the original Superman from 1978, we see Clark Kent's father when Clark is still the teenager in Smallville. There's a scene where Clark Kent was showing off a bit to his friends because he was a little bit upset at how they were treating him. And then his father tells him, "So you've been showing off?" And Clark Kent says, "Is it showing off when a bird could fly? And I can get a touchdown every time I get the football. Every time." His adoptive father says, I know, I understand. You can do all these incredible things, and sometimes you feel like you're just going to go bust." Clark says, yeah, and then the father says, "When we found you," he means when we found you as a baby, "we didn't know what was going to happen if someone was going to take you away. I don't know why you were sent here, but it was for a reason. I don't know what that reason is, but you were sent here for a reason. And one thing I do know is it wasn't to score touchdowns." So that scene was so powerful. Superman has this guidance as a child, as a teen, from his parents, from his father, telling him, "You are here to do very, very good things for the human race." I don't know exactly what it was, but it wasn't to score touchdowns. It wasn't to be selfish. It was to do something better than whatever you can achieve for selfish reasons. That's incredible grounding, an incredible scene. And then to contrast that with Man of Steel, not that it was a total screw-up, but in Man of Steel, Jonathan Kent, Superman's father, his adoptive father, says, "You're going to change the world, son, and you've got to decide what man you're going to be." It doesn't make it as clear, though, that you're not here to do selfish things. You're not here to get touchdowns with your special powers. Perhaps it takes genius to understand how to do that right. And hopefully, in this new Superman movie, they will get that right. But James Gunn, being the director and being famous for making movies with characters with moral ambiguity,
I am Groot. So what?
I don't know. He might still be able to do it. And similarly, in the original Superman film from 1978, there is an earthquake and Superman does everything to protect people and save people from the earthquake. He's saving trains from getting derailed and saving buses from toppling over cliffs, and stopping avalanches and preventing more people from getting killed and preventing danger and damage. But after all that, because he was so busy doing that, he failed to rescue Lois Lane, and Lois Lane dies. And the anguish this creates in Superman, and the anger it creates in Superman, and the frustration it creates in Superman, and the heartache. And then Superman decides to go against his own Kryptonian heritage because he's identifying more as a human now, and he breaks Kryptonian law by interfering with human history and going back in time. We see the massive, massive price he's willing to pay in order to save Lois Lane. That was an incredibly powerful scene, and yet it all stems from character because all he wanted to do was do the right thing. He's not a selfish character. This takes genius, it takes nuance, it takes sensitivity. You have to understand who Superman is. As Richard Donner said, Superman is American apple pie. This is sacred stuff. You don't mess with this stuff. So it's really important that they don't start to think that they're smart Alex with this new Superman movie and they're going to switch any of that. Now, getting back to the fact we've got Hawkgirl, Green Lantern, and Ultraman in it, these don't have to be bad things for the movie. It might be done in a way where it's actually quite interesting, like the Justice League is supposed to be. So, for example, Hawkgirl might add to the elements of the aerial fight scenes, and Ultraman, who seems very similar in powers to Superman, could show the mirror side or the opposite mirror of Superman, what it really means to be Superman in character, because the difference between Ultraman and Superman really is the personalities as opposed to the powers. As far as the flying scenes in this movie were inspired by the flying scenes from Top Gun Maverick, which is ironic because the flying scenes in Top Gun Maverick were actually inspired by the flying scenes for Man of Steel, and they used a lot of drone footage for the aerial shots. Although I enjoyed the flying scenes in Batman vs. Superman and in Man of Steel, the problem was that sometimes the flying was so fast, it was hard to follow, and it felt a bit like I'm just watching a video game as opposed to a movie where there's emotional stakes. Now let's get to Lex Luthor. Even though Nicholas Hoult is probably as good as he can possibly get to looking like Lex Luthor in this film, he looks young to me. And I know that in Smallville, it worked having a young Lex Luthor who's just a little bit older than Superman, but here it really looks like Lex Luthor is about the same age as Superman. It could still work, so I'm open to this working. It's just something that I was wondering, this guy seems a bit young for Lex Luthor. When it came to the music in the trailer, which I'm sure is just part of the music, and there'll be a lot of other music in the movie, I love the fact that they incorporated elements from the original soundtrack, including music from the famous Superman March. I wasn't a huge fan of the electric guitar and the rock and rolling up of this music. I think the music is so much more grand and cinematic than that. But again, this might just be something they used for the trailer and may not be the actual music we hear for most of the movie. So overall, this is a very promising teaser trailer for the new Superman movie. Hopefully, even the things that I'm concerned about turn out to be non-issues. Maybe they turn those things into strengths for this film. And I'm still keeping my hopes up that this movie can be as great as the original Superman film and inspire a whole new generation to really believe in all the ideals of Superman. If you've enjoyed this video, hit the like button and subscribe. And until next time, keep loving movies.